Between March and May 2012, the Mayor of Malmesbury, Steve Cox, interviewed a group of Malmesbury citizens about their memories of the town. This is their story. So, when did you first come to Malmesbury?
I was born in the hospital which stood on this site, and that's 83 years ago last December.
I first came when I was, before I was born, I suppose. My mother had me down Harper's Lane.
Well, I was born here in at Malmesbury Hospital.
I came to Malmesbury having retired, and I'd retired in 1997.
1985, 11th of December.
I first moved to Malmesbury with my mother and father and sister. We moved into this house, and I think it might have been Christmas Eve. It was around that time anyway, but it was definitely 1969, 1970, that sort of changeover.
I came here in 1970 when we'd just been married, my wife and myself.
Yeah.
Down to Cambridge Cottage.
We came August 1959.
We moved here in May 1980.
First come to Malmesbury, I think, I'm not exactly certain, I think it was 1987.
And where was your first home?
The first house in which we lived was 73 High Street, with my mum and my older half-sister and my dad. And then we went out to Corston. My dad had a house up Mill Lane called The Nook, and my auntie and my grandma that lived across the road at Brook House.
Number 1, Ferndale Terrace. That's the original name of the house.
Well, I lived in Bristol Street. That was where my mother and father lived.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to live at St Mary's Street in one of the cottages of the then Congregational Church.
Where I live now, Common Road.
Yes, I've only ever lived in 3 different places, which is Brinkworth, where I was born, on the council estate, and then we moved here, and then while I was a student in London.
We lived in Westport Schoolhouse, which has now been sold off. And it was next door to the school. It was a very bad way, with tiles missing, an outside lavatory, which was never improved in 5 years. And I had 3 babies there, so life was interesting.
Our first home and only home has been here, 85 Gloucester Road.
My first home in Malmesbury was 9 Burnham Road, which is next door to the Undertakers, which is the source of the only joke I ever made of it, is that my daughter, my daughter is called Bryony, says, "What happens when we die, Daddy?" And I said, "We just pass you over the fence."
We then asked them what their first impressions of Malmesbury had been.
Oh, we only came in across the common in my dad's car. I can't remember the high street as such, but I can remember the other end of town, the horse fair and the bakery up there.
Well, I can remember going back through my early school years. I can just about remember because I started school at what was then a mixed school in the Crosshays, where the library is now. That was a girls' school, but boys went there until I think they were 7.
I'd worked with and around Malmesbury for a good many years on and off, you see. And, well, yes, it was a nice country town. Quiet. You walked around any time of day or night. You may meet someone, you may not. But if you did, it was good night, and that's that.
Well, the early memories, I suppose, would be when I was about 3, wanting to go on a Sunday morning to Sunday school with my brothers. And that was in what is now the United Reformed Church.
I came to Malmesbury with my wife, and we went to the Abbey on a Sunday evening, and we saw a community of people who were attractive to be part of.
We, when we were relocating to this part of the world, we kept coming back to Malmesbury, and I think because it was a small town with a nice high street and the hog, we were attracted to it, I think.
When I first moved to Malmesbury, there were a lot of derelict properties around that time, which as kids was fantastic because we used to sneak into them and you know, just there was a different world, and I think that's one of the sort of significant changes. And I was interested in that because this property was rather like that.
Very different town then in 1970. West Street was, I think there were 4 houses occupied, bear in mind I came here as a postman, just 4 houses occupied in West Street, the rest were pretty well derelict. The horse fair, half the horse fair was empty. Reed's farm was a farm. In fact, I can remember delivering mail to Alan Webb, and he was actually hand milking cows on Reed's farm.
I think I was fascinated by the Abbey, coming over the top and seeing the Abbey in the afternoon sunshine, and the Market Cross, which of course is the centre of town in many ways for many people in different walks of life. And I loved the feel of it because I love old buildings.
My first impressions of Malmesbury, because I came from London, and my first impressions were it was just really different, a special place, a place that had real character. And I loved the countryside, I wanted to live nearer the countryside, nearer green fields.
And what about the earliest memories of the High Street?
Much as it is now. Lots of little shops. It was lovely.
The High Street, really, because it was full of shops, different grocer shops. There was, I think, 7 grocer shops in the High Street, or thereabouts.
1941 we're going back to now. It was nice, quiet. You went up or down as you wished. You parked whichever way you wished.
When I'm much older, when I'm a teenager, was a Tarantula coffee bar, which was where we all really was the hot spot. That would be open sort of from about 10 in the morning until 10 at night probably. And it would be your frothy coffee, so you'd go in there with your friends, and you did that as a teenager, and then you would go downstairs and dance. They had a really good cellar down there with jukebox, so you put on your record and you got up and danced, and that would be during the day, and all the young people did that, or a lot of them then.
People, different sort of shops, friendly people really.
And I can remember one of my earliest experiences of the High Street, this is children, was going into Ada's, the greengrocers, which was at the bottom of the High Street, probably where I think there's an estate agent there now.
Yes, members of the High Street, well, probably again delivering mail to them, and always being surprised to a postman that came here from Swindon, which is fairly conventionally built and fairly modern. Malmesbury was a nightmare because, of course, the High Street, Burnley Vale, and lots of other little of the old streets have got houses tucked away behind them that you're just unaware of completely. Go down into somebody's garden and find there's 2 more houses there. It's brilliant.
The High Street was delightful. I do remember one thing that nobody else will probably, a little tiny cafe called a Tarantula. And it was a tiny little place that you went down into a cellar, roughly where the the cake shop is at the top of the street now. And I thought it's the only modern thing around here.
Quite a lot of shops that were here when we first came weren't here for that much longer, but got very, very nice memories of them. There was Ada's Grocers, which always smelt beautifully of coffee, which is now an estate agent's. there was a wonderful shop. I can't remember exactly what it was called. It was something like at the indoor market, which is where Boots is now, which had lots of little stalls for different sorts of antiques. And, you know, when we had visitors down, they just raved over this. There was, you know, an area where it was all clocks and all sorts of different things. So that was wonderful.
I think that when we first came here, my first thought, the first view of the high street was that there were some shops that you normally associated with big towns. There was a Smith's, there was a Boots, I think there was an International Stores, and I thought, well, Malmesbury is obviously a greater place than just a little small country town. But,
my earliest memories on a Saturday morning was walking down Burnham Road, coming to the high street, and every other person said hello.
But as they walked up and down the high street, what were their favourite shops then?
Food. Anything, anywhere there was food was lovely, and the smell. You sort of walk past the bakery. You followed your nose in, like the Bisto kids.
The one I like to look in the window of is the cycle shop.
Mm-hmm.
I like my bicycle, and I bought a nice bicycle which I've used a lot from the bike shop.
Probably W.H. Smith. Well, I've always been fond of knees. Cadell's, of course, were operating in the butchers at Bottom High Street, 58 High Street. And they used to deliver, brilliant, they used to deliver meat down to, you know, around the local villages, which included us down at Cowbridge.
I suppose the one that stands out, of course, is Knees, because that is still a link to the past. Knees.
Malmesbury has always been known for its colourful and significant characters, but who were the characters that really stood out for our group?
Elsie Stevens. Now, Elsie was my late father-in-law's cousin. Elsie was born and bred in the town. She never knew her father, or was, as my other relation used to say, her mother had her unfortunate. But Elsie knew that we were relation, and she'd stop you in the street. You be relation to I, Benny. When you saw Elsie coming, you picked up your speed and kept walking, but you always said, "Hello, Elsie." You wouldn't pass her. But Elsie was always there.
Bill Clark, Cracker Clark. And he had, like a good many more people, always had a henchman which they called Greek. They called him Greek. He always had a sheriff's star up here, you see, or on his hat. Greek lived over the mill. He washed once in a while, not too often. And Mr. Clark, that we must call him Mr. Clark now, lived in a caravan. They had a monkey. And one day I met Lil, that was Bill, Mr. Clark's wife, and I said, "Whatever's wrong with your leg?" Oh, she said, "The monkey's been a bit me." I said, "I'd have the damn thing put down." She said, "But I'd love him." And her leg was in a terrible state.
There was a guy called Corsham Bond, and he was a good footballer. I can remember one night we came out of the Plough, which is a pub down the bottom there. Charlie Bond was led out on the floor in front of a double-decker bus, but the bus had stopped, and the bus driver and the conductor were out looking at Charlie, led out, unconscious on the floor. And we went up there and we said, "What's the matter?" And they said, "Oh, Charlie's..." Well, they didn't know it was Charlie. We said, "Oh, that's Charlie Bond." "Oh yeah, we'll see to him." So we dragged him across and the bus went off. No taken of any questions asked, they went. So we put Charlie into indoors and said, well, we looked for his key in his pockets, and he had a key in there. So we undone the door, put him in there and said, "You okay, Charlie?" "Oh, I should be all right." So he was asleep. The following morning at 10 o'clock, he was stood outside the Cups, waiting to get in for drink.
There was also Cracker Clark. He was quite a character. And his assistant, Frank, who he always wore
guns. I mean, toy guns, obviously, because they had a monkey and different animals down there. So those were some quite colourful characters.
I remember somebody who was a tramp called Ken Hudson. He was a very popular person, probably as well known as the mayor. And the other person who I particularly stand out is Henry Wheeler. Come on, ye Reds. And Henry and I used to do stewarding every Sunday in the Abbey.
Obviously, there's always going to be Henry. Henry was a key character, and because I was involved with football, there was a number of people I got involved with. People like Alan Baker, people such as that. Dave and Marion Pitzer, of course, Pete Bown. And I think football really helped us get ourselves known in the society and did a lot for us.
Elsie, whether it was Elsie Tanner, she was called Elsie Tanner, but she lived up at the top of Dark Lane. I think she must have lived in what was the old workhouses, and she was there to begin with, and then she moved to St Mary's Road. And she was a really interesting character because every time you went past her, she always, whether summer or whatever, she had these great big black sort of working boots, and she always wore a hat. And with everyone that went past, she was obviously, pretty a mixture of being a bit simple and quite sort of paranoid. She would say, "Us folks got to be careful, Ennis. Us folks got to be careful."
Well, yeah, Bill Savin was a classic. Bill Savin was a postman. The first time I saw him, I had just transferred, I think, to Malmesbury when the postman went on strike. He was always out to make another shilling. He would go sprout picking in the winter, spud picking, and then pick up sacks of spuds with a tractor and trailer. He knew every farmer in the area. Get a tractor and trailer, load them up with spuds, and then bring them around the town, selling them, to his customers. He'd sweep chimneys. I can remember seeing him skip across the ridges of cottages from one chimney to another. He'd just walk along like a bloody tightrope walker with the brushes in his hands and sweep down, put a sheet on the fireplace inside and sweep down.
Well, I think even from those days, Elsie. Now, Elsie, am I being unkind if I say she was a little short of a penny halfpenny or two? But she was a great character, and my husband in his first week went out to the Triangle to go to the post office, and standing there was Elsie, and she was buying some sweets, and he also noticed she'd got a great bag of logs, far too heavy for her to carry. So he said, "Would you like me to take your logs home for you?" "Oh yeah, well, that's round the corner." And he lifted the logs up. By that time she'd gone in front of him. And the shopkeeper said, "Wait a minute, Mr. Price, wait a minute. She said schoolmaster will pay." And so he came out and he found that he had to walk a very long way with this log. So he thought, what have I done? I feel an absolute fool. They'll say, that stupid new headmaster. What's he doing following Elsie?
I mean, Scan was a wonderful character
really,
because all these young lads, these tough-looking young lads, would sort of go up the road, "Hello, Scan," and we gathered quickly that he had, a great reputation at school, and heard stories about how he'd line all these tough guy kids up against a wall and say, "Last one to the library's a sissy," and they all go for it. So of course, they all adored him.
Character who really stood out was Henry, because Henry was so different, cycling around, shouting out, "Come on, you Reds," and especially at this time of year, impersonating the cuckoo. And he would just go around, he would just cycle around impersonating the cuckoo. And he was just very different. And if you got talking to him, he had some very strong views, and he was just fascinating. He is a throwback to earlier rural times, Henry.
So when you were young, how did you spend your summer holidays?
Down the meadow, paddling in the brook, because we lived up Mill Lane, and we could go down Mill Lane and down the Down Lane and down to the brook and across the fields or up in West Park Wood. Always outside somewhere. We might paddle in the river, but Mother was not happy about that. And I still can't swim. I didn't have occasion to learn because all we had was the brook at Corston, and with the cows going in, it was a bit nippy.
Well, quite a bit of it was in the cinema because we had good pictures there. There was good company there. I didn't have these confounded popcorns, and that's why I refuse to go to pictures now. It's banging and crashing about. You did as Mrs. John Mott. Mm-hmm. His mother was there, and any mucking around, you were out with these youngsters. And yes, I suppose we went probably twice a week. Once a week it's certain on a Saturday night.
When I was a boy of about 15, I suppose, no, perhaps, yes, about 15, I joined the YMCA, which was a Young Man's Christian Association, but they had snooker tables and table tennis and things like that in there. It was where underneath the Oxford Room in the town hall. That was a snooker room.
I learned to swim when I was a child, but we would have played.
Mm-hmm.
We would have station yard, there's all those sort of places, camps and.
When I was very young, we used to go to Blackpool. My dad used to take me to look at the trams coming out of the tram sheds every morning.
Or, we used to make dens in the garden and have friends round, and there were stinging nettles taller than we were, being that age.
Just playing in the fields. We'd go off, middle of the morning and come back middle of the evening, just take some bread and cheese with us and we'd be gone.
We had our summer holidays down at Holywell Bay near Newquay. We had, in those days, we had a motorbike and sidecar. And my father constructed a small little caravan which we towed behind the motorbike and sidecar. The caravan stepped to and the back came up and there's a little kitchenette area, and so every August for 2 weeks we were down in Holywell Bay. That was a very nice time.
I had an old bike. I had a bicycle I rode a lot, and my dad, my dad was a teacher, and he was a great believer in taking us camping, taking us caravanning, and going out of London. And so when we were young, we used to go to Devon and Cornwall and the Lake District. And when we got a bit older, in the early 60s, we started going to France and Spain.
And what games do you remember playing when you were young?
Board games, skipping, hoopla, taking your hoop with a stick, whip and top, all the outside games.
We would play football or cricket right until it was dark, and it was during those war years the clock was put on 2 hours summertime. So you had an extra hour, so it was still light at 11 o'clock at night.
And we played in the streets a lot, all those sort of things. In the streets, no cars, so you played whatever games, 2-ball, marbles, and out in the streets really, as a small child. Well, not as a small child, when I was a bit older and you were able to be out there.
Oh, football and cricket. We once played rugby league, but didn't do much rugby. Always football and cricket.
Well, we lived in the country, and I was an only child, so it was when I had friends round, we'd sort of make dens in sheds and fields and so on.
When you were a teenager, how did you spend your spare time?
Going out in the country on my bike, because I learned to ride a bike when I was 9, and so I could come in and cycle in. I went to work on post office counter 1945 when I was just turned 16.
We would go potato picking. There was a farm up Dare's farm up Milbourne, which planted potatoes for the for rationing in for people people to have during the war, and we would go and pick potatoes for 6 months an hour. Rock Around the Clock was a film which was banned in Swindon. They couldn't have it in the picture houses there. So Malmesbury had it, and of course it drew people from all round. And it was the only time that Malmesbury Picture House was ever full. In fact, there was a queue waiting to get in from the picture house through the market cross, right round through the Bird's Cage, and out the other side into Gloucester Road Street.
When I was a teenager, I lived away from home at a place called Leckhampton Farm. I enjoyed much of the much of the farming, driving tractors, feeding the stock.
One of the greatest things in my life has been music throughout my life, listening to music and going to see music, and also socialising.
If you had to choose a favourite spot in Malmesbury, where would it be and why?
Daniel's Well. Definitely.
Well, you've got to choose, I think, between the Common and the Worthies. And another nice place, Harper's Lane, runs into a little wall track either side, and that is where the old washerwomen, they say, went down to get the water to do their washing with.
My favourite, the place that I can remember best through growing up, would have been in the YMCA. That would have been my favourite place.
Looking up from Daniel's Well and looking up to the town, or even going through, is if you're going through to in that field past there. You go out of Daniel's Well, you go through into the big field, and you can see right up, and you can see the vista of the whole town. I think that looks lovely.
Oh, Daniel's Well. Daniel's Well is, it just appeals to me.
But actually, joking apart, I love being in the hog just for the atmosphere.
And then just coming up the high street, that whole experience, I got to love more and more.
But actually it would be just outside. But living where I do, down at Cambridge, I used to walk down to Angrove Woods a lot. And midway between the two is a place that a lot of local people will know, the Roaring Hatches. Lots of people have talked, old people have talked to me and told me that they swum there by the Roaring Hatches, which you could do. There's an old drover's bridge there, or there was, it's actually fallen into disrepair now. But I used to sit down there a lot bird watching, and I've watched kingfishers nesting down there.
I think it's very difficult to say. I must say parts of Abbey Gardens is really beautiful now. But I used to enjoy going into the Abbey. And I think the old horse fair and the Triangle, when it's quiet, not too much traffic, it's an interesting and tucked away area.
The top of Coniger Mead, when you walk across the top and you look back and you can see Abbey House, and you get that real sense of it as a hilltop town, or almost anywhere or sort of around the river walk, really, where you can stop and look at the view. I don't think there's one particular place.
But my favourite spot in Malmesbury had some, well, there's one obvious location, the bell tower, of course.
I really like walking down Abbey Road, and I always find it fascinating, the sort of the gap in the houses in Abbey Road where you can look out and see the countryside.
How would you like to see Malmesbury developing in the future?
A bit more like it was in the past, with little shops because it's all very fine having big shops out on the edge, but how are the little old ladies supposed to get there? And your little old ladies need food and sustenance just as well as the young ones who've got cars and can drive anywhere.
No, that's a funny one, isn't it? Because we shan't be here to worry about that. I mean, you wouldn't want to change it too much, but I mean, it's inevitable it will be changed, one way or another.
and I really think there's room perhaps for it to grow, but I don't think we've got room for another supermarket in the town. Really, it's not big enough for that.
I'd like the high street obviously to stay strong, because that's important. I personally don't think we need a supermarket, but I think one's going to come anyhow. So I think probably we can survive with a supermarket, but we don't want the town to get too big, because that's its charm.
Well, I'd like Malmesbury to grow in its confidence, and share that same confidence throughout the community.
Inevitably some growth is going to happen whether we like it or not. But it would be nice, and I don't see how it could happen if the high street could be pedestrianised. I just don't see it happening. I think there's too many problems. But that would be an ideal. I'll tell you what I wouldn't like to see. I wouldn't like to see 2 supermarkets. How would I like to see it? The old town, I just leave the old town alone. Expansion, I guess, is inevitable. I don't understand why today they have to build houses higher than trees. I don't understand that. Yes, I do understand it, because you can get more houses in. If you build them thin and build them high, you can get more houses in the acreage.
I don't want any of the centre ruined by doing wrong building. I think eventually we are going to have a supermarket, whether we like it or not. And I think that it almost may even develop into a kind of small second town. But I think it's imperative we keep our high street very alive, and that we encourage people to come and we use the shops.
I would just like to see more small shops back in the high street, really.
And also, I would really like to see something very positive happen to Oxford Street. I think Oxford Street is a bit sad, and I'd like to see Oxford Street. I'd like to see the buildings renovated, and I'd like to see Oxford Street bloom again.
If you had to have a message for the young people of today, what would it be?
Come and live here. It's brilliant.
There's wonderful opportunities with great variety these days. The opportunities are not just as to what subject you choose to study at university, but how you want to live your life, who you want to be.
Get on with it. Just get on with it. Don't sit and let it happen to you. I wish I'd been more like that when I was younger.
I would say try your best to be yourself, and to do that you don't just look out into the world, you have to look into yourself, and the relationship between what's outside and what's inside is the key.
Be young, be foolish, be happy. That's the time, and enjoy it whilst you're young. But I've been very lucky to come to Malmesbury. I think some of the happiest days of my life have been in Malmesbury, so I'm very lucky that I've come here.
What memories do you have of school life, either during or after the war?
We went into school in September 1939. We'd hardly got there before the evacuees arrived, which meant we had more children in each class. But it was lovely. I thoroughly enjoyed school. I love school. My younger sister couldn't abide it, but I loved school all my life and couldn't wait to get back after the holidays.
There was 2 huge water tanks, one up in the Cross Hayes and one in the Horsefair here, built to contain water in case there was fire, I think, so the fire engines could use what water there was in them, and they were never used in Malmesbury, but they were used later on for to put a slippery pole across. I think that was about the time that they would have had a carnival.
Primary school I was always a top boy. Grammar school was a real struggle. I think I might have been a bit complacent really, and it was hard work, grammar school, but I got there in the end and just passed my O-levels. The cottage where I lived with my mum and dad and family was about 100 yards from the school. I was very often late, living as close as I did, And within a couple of days I decided that I didn't like it and ran off, and they let the whole damn school run after me. Not just the teacher, but the whole, come on, go and get him. And I was gallivanting across the fields very soon caught up with me. I do remember that.
Particularly remember one Jewish boy, Lee and Kasher, and they came down to Lee to live and came into our school. But the evacuees sort of came and went, you know, their families sometimes took them back home, or sometimes their families had just been here for a while and then moved other places. We had servicemen, because we had RAF Lavington, we had service families from there. So the children from there came in on the school bus. All the villages around, children came into secondary school. So I've got friends on a sort of 15-mile radius of Malmesbury, people with whom I went to school. And at one time I organised a get-together of our school friends when the Knoll was still a pub, a hotel. We used to go up there on Easter Monday, and by the time we had to give up because they were giving up at the hotel, we had 50 men and women from my class and above me and below me at school. We used to get there. It was great.
During the war, my mother and my sister and I lived in Cape Town. Cape Town was absolutely chock-a-block, and it was very hard to have anywhere to live. When eventually we were booked onto a ship, we left the nice, lovely living conditions that we had enjoyed, got on the ship, and my sister and I slept in a bed with our feet together, and it was so tight to one bunk to another that you couldn't sit up as little children. When the boats all assembled to become a convoy, just on the outside of Cape Town, where the rollers are about a quarter mile or more between the top of one wave and the next one, the boiler of our ship blew up, and the Japanese submarine had been seen 2 days before.
We had two male lodgers. They were boffins. One seconded from the RAF, one seconded from the Navy. We never knew what they did. They had just come over all the time from RAF Lavington, from Yatesbury, from Lynham, and Bedford and Babdown. They used to go night flying to Babdown from Lavington. They used to come through to go and fly there. But it didn't impact on the town. We had no bombs on the town at all. All out round, all the hayricks and anything else that could be set fire to by fire bombs. We had planes following trains down the railway track at Lavington and machine gunning that lot, but nothing on the town. We had a big water tank, static water tank in the Cross Hayes down the bottom end. It was it was bigger than this room, but in case they needed to pump water out to put out fires.
I can just about remember my early days up at Malmesbury Boys' School, and I would have been perhaps 10 then when they had evacuees came, of course, then from the big cities, and in fact I'm still friendly with one very much, Stan New, and there was a place out at Lee, which was called Lee Court, where they were Borstal boys, and they came to Malmesbury School, and caused quite a bit of trouble there really for the headmaster. He used to cane them most days, 2 or 3 of them.
We got to go back a long way again now. 39 or just after that, we had a German Jewish sect come there to live. They'd come out from Germany, you see, called the Bruderhof. They had a place at Ashton Keynes and this place at Oaks, you see, and then eventually they pushed them off to Argentine, you see. But, I mean, they were good. If I remember them now, they were big men with great black beards and black suits, but gentlemen. You imagine these poor little kids from London, some that high, they got off at Oaksey Halt, and there wasn't a house in sight anywhere. They'd just well been out in the middle of the desert, you see. Thing that's always stuck in my mind, as I said, I've not No one ever mentioned it to me, but I've told several people. We were on Swindon Station one night, because we always went to my parents, always took us to pictures. Here's the train coming in. The doors opened and out these poor fellows came. You never see anything so frightening. Torn, dirty, filthy. Some had a few bandages on, but not knocked about, and that was Dunkirk. And that train went out, here's ours coming in, and I don't know how we got home that night. Another train came in. The same thing happened again, these poor fellows, absolutely filthy. But no one has ever mentioned it to me. He's never read it in the papers.
I can well remember those war years because Malmesbury was quite an unusual place at that time. It was full of soldiers. And Americans and British, because there was a big American camp out at Chawton Park. It was black. It was a black camp because there was regiments of black soldiers then. This town here being full of British and American and Canadian soldiers. They would spend a lot of time because they were posted in churches like the one just over the road here. The United Reformed Church had troops staying there, and so did the other churches in the town.
And I've always been a churchgoer, and we always had celebrations, especially in church once the war was over. A service of Thanksgiving, the Abbey was full, absolutely. Everyone who was everyone turned out to say, "Thank you, Lord, it's over. We're safe."
And finally, what memories do you have of Malmesbury carnivals of the past?
We've always made sure that we were somewhere about. Now Tony, I call him Tony, Derek, what you doing? I said, no, we've never missed a carnival. Well, we were, of course, because I was working, you see. He said, do me a favour, sort of thing. I said, well, what is it? He said, will you come with me to Longleat? I said, what the hell do you want to go to Longleat for? Oh, he said, pick up a lion. I said, bloody fool, what's he talking about? Well, he said, no, pick up a lion cub. So, off we go to Longleat this summer's night, well, you know, or afternoon rather, and pick up this lion cub and bring it back so that he could or the trainer, I mean, he wouldn't let anybody else handle it. Only a nice cub, mind you, so all these kids could sort of get round it, you know, and have a good time. I thought he would have torn the thing to pieces because, unfortunately, we had a dog guard up, you see, because, you know, no way was it settled down in there. No fear.
When I came here in 70, there was an old codger, a bit like me, who I used to look for. And he was always in the pedestrian. I don't know what his name was. I've never seen a picture of him. I think if I saw a picture of him, I'd remember him. But I used to look for that old codger, and it's a sort of sobering experience to think that there are people out there now that might be looking for this old codger. But I do remember the guy that did YMCA with those wonderful 4 or 5 characters on canes, and he just blared the music out. And my own efforts, I did a longboat, a canal boat with the tunnel house and the Daneway from the Cotswold canals, and that was good.
Steve Cox, Mayor of Malmesbury, thank you very much
Not
indeed.
for much longer. Thank you, Graham.